I'm Elizabeth Falcon with DC Jobs with Justice.
Hi, and I'm Megan Makaraeg with Many Languages, One Voice.
And we're here to tell you about the Excluded Worker Campaign. So the Excluded Worker Campaign grew out of educational sessions organized by DC Jobs with Justice at the very beginning of the pandemic. In those, we realized that there was a sector of workers who didn't matter if we taught them about unemployment or federal stimulus checks, they would not be able to access them. And we wanted to work together in solidarity to support these folks. So we came up with a term, excluded workers, in that workshop and began to work together. Excluded workers are people who are in the cash economy or don't have proof of income because they do things like they're day laborers or street vendors or sex workers. People who are undocumented and therefore locked out of federal programs, and returning citizens who don't have a work history. And everybody in this group needed cash. So in March, the Excluded Worker Coalition began to call for cash assistance for people who could not get stimulus checks or unemployment. Very quickly, the campaign had a great breadth and depth. This was our coalition list by early April. So what did we win? Over the course of the campaign, we won a total of $14 million in direct financial assistance for excluded workers. The first $5 million was committed in April.
During the beginning of DC's budget process, we engaged in really assertive inside and outside strategies that were very connected. While the Twitter actions and sign-on letters continued in early June, at Freedom Plaza, where over 250 people attended with a car caravan and a socially distant action. It was a really great example of intersectional organizing with strategic collaboration between inside
to ultimately get $9 million in the budget.
Since we couldn't go to the Wilson building, we got creative and we went to people's homes. We wanted to make sure each council member understood our issues, so we tailored every visit to an analysis of that person's self-interest, just like we would do with a traditional council visit in the Wilson building. Here you can see children leading the way with Councilmember Robert White. And because Councilmember White has children of his own, he dropped them down immediately to make eye contact with our kids. Even though Councilmember Mary Che was not used to these sort of drop-in council visit sort of actions, we reminded her that legislation is actually happening in the homes right now when we turned up on her front lawn with over 125 workers. We gave his partner a traditional home-cooked Salvadorian meal when we had a vending fair with lots and lots of people fed and given masks in the street in front of Chairman Mendelson's house.
Unfortunately, Chairman Mendelson was an impediment throughout the course of the campaign. When the council had already committed $9 million in assistance, as the council was about to vote, Chairman Mendelson proposed actually rolling back that amount of money, in addition to other critical COVID-related relief like increased rental assistance. And so the campaign had to keep the pressure on really high for the last 2 weeks to make sure that when that vote ultimately did happen, that no cuts were made to the $9 million that had been committed to excluded workers or to other human needs programs. And when the majority of the council had accepted our definition of excluded workers, he still only wanted to fund assistance for a narrower group. So we continued to agitate and to be at his home.
In the end, however, we won over the vast majority of the council in an 11-2 vote that included budget funding for all excluded workers, despite the chairman's opposition. All the groups that came out were many and varied. They included restaurant workers from Rock, DC that turned out for a series of direct actions for over 3 weeks. They included street vendors who were essential oil and cleaning supply vendors, as well as food vendors who you see here feeding our folks and giving out ponchos and rain masks while we practiced mutual aid along the way. Another key partner included domestic workers through the National Domestic Workers Alliance, who came with bright shirts and children and caregivers in order to help us keep up the drumbeat during almost 3 weeks of direct action. And let's not forget members of African Kings Together who came to help us lead a prayer vigil in Mendelson's home, when earlier they were part of a really effective car caravan in our initial actions. Tips and Tamika helping us knock on Chairman Mendelson's front door early in the morning to remind him that we wanted him on our side before he went in to chair council meetings and key votes. This was a super powerful example of intersectional organizing led by Black and Indigenous people of color in different sectors of the informal economy. An example of new labor organizing that we'll need to lean on to build density for all workers in the years to come. We brought together diverse workers. We were able to fight not just for a budget win, but to fight for a frame of excluded workers that didn't leave anyone out. We utilized direct action and built relationships and shared power. And all along the way, Black and Indigenous people of color were supported by advocates, movement organizations, organized labor, faith groups, and service providers.
So we're really excited to get to hear from the members of this coalition, each of the organizations we've introduced you to, who are recipients of the I'll Be There Award.